You have probably heard about the new EU chat control laws that have been passed a few days, I think, ago. And in this video I want to share my opinion or my thoughts on why I think this is useless. And I mean, it's really all in this image, but yeah, let me go through it. So again, why the EU chat control is useless is, and this is the main point, the EU really only cares about the masses. And I mean, every state only cares about the masses, really. In the sense that they try to, well, catch the most people they can by their regulations. And I mean, this is obvious. What other way could it be? Because the EU, as every state, as every company, as every organization, as everything, only has limited resources. And I mean, in the case of the European Union, of course, these resources are very huge. Like, they have a lot of resources, obviously. But still, they are limited, so they cannot really have as a goal to achieve like 100% of whatever it is they want to achieve. So they have to go by a method like this. They have to have a net in which they try to catch as many people as they can. And of course, I mean, we don't have to talk about this, I think, that chat control, like for every like messenger, for every, well, mainstream messenger, I mean, this will get you like pretty much everyone. But you can easily circumvent this surveillance, and if you look at the picture from the beginning, you can already see how, by, well, simply hosting your own stuff and kind of, yeah, escaping the net, which catches everyone else. And I mean, we can discuss whether that is like 100% secure and whatnot. And I mean, of course, I want to keep this, like, keep the scope here on the new European Union chat control regulations. I mean, we can discuss whether three-letter agencies have already like undermined everything, and they have 0 days for everything, and every computer in the world is kind of infected or compromised anyways because of the Intel ME and so on and so forth. I mean, sure. But if we just like look at the new chat control regulations, hosting your own stuff is very sufficient, I think, for circumventing them, because the regulations, you really can only regulate big entities. So companies, organizations generally, states of course, and so on. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's my point. You can't really regulate every single individual. That's just not feasible by the sheer amount of resources that would take. And I mean, the European Union is not like, they don't have infinite resources, obviously. So you can't really do that. And I mean, if we like kind of zoom out and look again at the whole three-letter agencies, Intel ME thing, you kind of see the same thing. The net in this case is, of course, well, digital technology in itself. So, but again, that's not what we're interested here. So if you host your own stuff, you really are outside that net, really. You kind of escaped it, because again, you will not fall into these, or you will not fall under these kind of regulations. And again, and I also want to mention this, of course, you have to, if you host your own stuff, you will probably have a virtual private server, and this will be, again, hosted at some company. You will also probably have a domain, and so on and so forth. So, again, but this is a level deeper, which kind of sits in between, like the chat regulations, for example, and the three-letter agency Intel ME thing, or not thing, but layer. So if you imagine these as 3 layers, like VPS providers and the domain system and all that kind of sits in between, and internet service providers and stuff like that. But again, I think the chat level, the chat control like level is kind of very surface level and doesn't really impact you if you just host your own stuff and use your own stuff and just avoid all these big messaging services which are hit by this. Like, obviously every mainstream messenger is hit by this. I mean, most of them are just are obviously already tracking you, like, I don't know, WhatsApp or, well, Telegram. Telegram is always kind of a difficult thing to argue about, but again, I mean, Telegram doesn't use end-to-end encryption by default. I mean, do we have to talk any further about that? But also now Signal is hit with this, and this is also what I talked about in the other video, which I recommend in this kind of vein, because it's about why you can't move your friends to another messenger, is exactly that. Signal is now hit by state regulation because they are a big centralized organization. like, that's it. Like, that's, I mean, there's no further discussion to be had there, I think. But if you again host your own like XMPP server or something, you really escape this. And I think Matrix is kind of in between, because of course the Matrix is like, Matrix protocol is exactly that, a protocol, sure. But I think, and I thought about mentioning this in the other video about messengers and friends and whatnot, but I kind of didn't, because it's a kind of point that goes a bit deeper down the rabbit hole. Because you might say, again, Matrix is decentralized, you can host it yourself, and so on and so forth. But Matrix is really trying to compete with mainstream messengers. And with that comes a lot of complexity, a lot of like software complexity, and also software size. Because to implement some features, it's just very complex. Like sending messages from like point A to point B, okay, that's pretty straightforward. But like implementing, I don't know, you can look at Matrix and see what nice fancy features they have, and just think about how you would implement this. And you will quickly realize, well, it's actually pretty difficult to implement that. And it takes the corresponding amount of code, and you have to kind of manage the code. You kind of have to have people who, of course, write the code. And this means that your organization, well, first up, you need an organization for this, to organize such a project. But it also means that this organization must grow in size the more complex the software gets. And the same also, in a certain sense, holds true for like the network effect, because you need, for example, Matrix needs, if it wants to have mainstream appeal, it needs to have a sleek user interface. It needs to have a good aesthetic. And something like XMPP, which is really not backed by any big organization, it is just something that has naturally evolved over time, doesn't require that. Well, doesn't require is kind of wrong, like, doesn't really hit the point, because what I rather want to say it doesn't have this appeal to compete with big messengers. So the XMPP protocol. So yeah, I think, but again, I mean, you can debate that and all that, but these are just some of my thoughts on that. So maybe like the Matrix protocol, like the organization behind it, will also be hit by state regulations sooner or later. How these regulations will look, how the impact will be, and so on and so forth is kind of, I mean, we can't foresee the future, of course, like this exact kind of future. But my point is that whenever you have a big organization, it can be hit with state regulation, and you as an individual really can't. Because, and I think this is another point, or rather, this is like a more, how could you say, expansive point maybe, or more general point, that not only does the European Union or any kind of state only care about masses when it comes to privacy, they only care about mass, like, in general. Whenever you do something and it doesn't really have a big impact, like you have, well, you can say you have low numbers, no one cares. Like, it's only when things get popular that people actually start to care what's the content of this thing. I mean, it's really the same kind of with opinions, I guess. It's only when an opinion becomes popular and kind of threatens quote unquote the mainstream, only then does it get, well, you could say, taken seriously and responded to, and so on and so forth. But these kind of niches, these kind of opinion niches, which may be very extreme, if they are small enough, like, no one cares. Like, whatever, just let them exist. Yeah, so it's only when things get so big that you can't ignore them anymore on a, like, how could you say, societal, cultural level, it's only then that regulation and reaction comes in. And another point I want to mention is, I mean, maybe I should have said that a bit earlier in the video, but I think in this case it's not really relevant why exactly the European Union is passing these laws. I mean, they say it's for child protection and whatnot. And I mean, we can, like, there's a debate to be had on whether that's like factually required or factually necessary or technically necessary, maybe. As in, okay, how big will this impact actually be? But I think, and this is now kind of more, I don't know, a more general in a bigger scope, or in a wider scope rather, if you look at this and you think about, okay, the technical world we live in, or the technological society, or you can also say the system, quote unquote, what the system does is optimize. And for optimization, you need data. And if you look at it kind of like this in a kind of, I want to say italic sense, so without thinking about all the details and all the facts and all the stuff too much, if you kind of look at it like that, you see that the system automatically forms and transforms and morphs, in a sense, in a direction where it can optimize better. If that makes sense. Again, this is a very, like, this is not something, yeah, I can, like, tell you with facts or whatnot. But this is more a sociological point of view, maybe. And I mean, the book that I've said that in a video before, the book that really kind of shows this viewpoint the best, I think, is Jacques Ellul's The Technological Society. If you care about that kind of stuff. So yeah. But for like just the normal individual, really this the state regulation stuff, I mean, in this case it really doesn't matter, I think. Because I mean, messaging is, like, using a messenger is first up not like vitally important, I would say. I mean, it of course depends in what like situation you are in your life and whatnot. Maybe you need it for work or whatnot. But in general, I just don't really see the impact here, to be honest. And I mean, yeah, this is an important point. I should have said this earlier. I mean, if like people who are doing like quote unquote bad stuff, they of course they read the news. Like they know what's going on. They know that WhatsApp is being surveilled and Telegram is leaking all your messages to the government or whatnot. Maybe I don't know. I mean, they will of course move or try to move outside this net. Like, obviously. I mean, yeah, it's really kind of, yeah, it's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of useless, I guess, as I said in the title. Because, I mean, they will just avoid it. I mean, who you get, like, okay, let me kind of wrap this up in the following. So the sociological, like, point of view I stated earlier, it's not about data. It's also about data, but it's not only about data. It's also about controlling the mass, or the masses, of course. And so what this does is, it's not about like the individual who does bad stuff, who, I don't know, whatever. But it's about that this can't be normal in that sense, if that makes sense. So it's really about, like, yeah, controlling the mass. I mean, sure, that's what it is. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I had to say on this. Again, I mean, if you were worried about this and you think, well, this can't be happening, we need a petition or whatnot, we need to like make people aware of this. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've been through all that, to be honest, through all the activism stuff about privacy and whatnot, and about making people aware and whatnot. And most people just don't care because it doesn't have a direct impact on them. I mean, it's the old "I don't have anything to hide" argument and whatnot. And you can't really make people care just by, well, this is important, blah blah. They just don't really. If they don't see the point already, they are not gonna see the point when you explain when you explicitly explain what exactly is technically happening and so on. Yeah, it really doesn't make an impact, I have found. Maybe for you it's different, maybe in your milieu it's a different thing, and maybe you are successful in telling people, well, this is important, and they listen to you and whatnot. Then, I mean, and either way, like, do your stuff, like, try what you want to do. I'm not saying anything against that. I just want to kind of state my experience with that, and that has not been that, yeah, fruitful, I would say. So yeah, and again, just honestly, just host your own stuff. Try to like tell the people you care about, okay, I want to write on this messenger now because everything else is getting surveilled, and I think you will be fine if you do that. And again, if you like, you can watch my other video on why you can't move your friends to another messenger. But honestly, just like, if someone doesn't care about you enough to like respect you on this issue, or respect your your worldview and your opinion and what you want to do on something important like this, then yeah, they don't really care about you enough, I would say. So yeah, all right. I think that's everything. Oh yeah, I also want to mention this. I also mentioned it at the end of the other video. I've written a pretty lengthy article on my thoughts on privacy in like a more general term. So this is not really about concrete issues like the EU chat control or something, but more in general terms, a bit higher in abstraction and whatnot. You can read it on my website. I'll leave a link in the description. And yeah, that's it. Have a nice day.